Thanksgiving has always been my favorite holiday, and also the one that made me feel the smallest. I remember walking up to my parents' front door, my hands wrapped around a dish I'd spent all morning preparing, my heart brimming with a quiet hope that maybe this year things would feel different. Maybe this year my family would notice the little victories I'd been carrying silently for months. "Hey, sweetie," Mom's voice called from the kitchen as I stepped inside. She looked tired but cheerful, her apron dusted with flour. I smiled, careful to keep the tremor of nervous excitement under control. I had a promotion at work, a real step up, something I had fought for and earned after countless late nights, extra projects, and presentations that had left me exhausted yet exhilarated. I wanted to share it, I wanted their pride, but something in me hesitated. In the past, my wins had felt invisible, filtered through the noise of casual dismissals and overlooked achievements. Still, I carried the announcement like a fragile gift in my pocket, wondering if they'd notice it this time. We gathered around the table, the aroma of roasted turkey, pumpkin pie, and buttered rolls filling the room. I slid into my usual spot at the end of the table, a place I had claimed over the years without anyone ever contesting it. I looked at my family, their faces bright in the soft golden light, and felt a pang of longing. I wanted to tell them. I wanted to say, I did something you would be proud of, but I also wanted to see if they'd notice without my prompting. "Pass the potatoes, please," Dad said, and the ritual of passing dishes began. My brother sat across from me, scrolling on his phone, barely looking up. I swallowed the knot in my throat and made a small, casual remark. "By the way, I got promoted last month," I said lightly, keeping my tone conversational, as if mentioning the weather. "I sent the email to you guys." The room froze. Not the polite pause before a compliment, not the gentle acknowledgement of good news, but the kind of silence that stretches like a weight across every word unsaid. Mom's fork hovered midair, her eyes widened in confusion. What do you mean?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "I emailed you," I repeated, my fingers tightening slightly around my napkin. "The group chat, remember?" Dad leaned back, frowning. We didn't see anything. I don't know how we missed it." My brother glanced up from his phone, just long enough for me to notice the flicker of guilt, or was it annoyance, before he looked away again. Something in the way his hand shook slightly told me there was more behind the silence than simple forgetfulness. The rest of the meal passed in a blur. My words felt heavier than the dishes I'd carried, and I realized that no one was going to congratulate me, not now, not here. The laughter at the table felt like it belonged to everyone else. I felt like a guest in my own home, a quiet observer of warmth that seemed just out of reach. Later, when everyone was cleaning up, I stepped into the living room, my phone in hand. My thumb hesitated over the group chat app. A year's worth of messages scrolled past, and then I noticed it. My messages had been blocked. Not just ignored, but actively blocked by my brother. Every congratulatory message, every little attempt to share my life, every invitation to connect had been silently erased from his world. I sank onto the couch, the realization settling around me like a cold, quiet fog. The betrayal wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with yelling or tears. Just a subtle, deliberate erasure of my existence in their digital world. And yet it hurt more than anything I had expected. In that quiet moment, I didn't scream, I didn't storm out. I just sat there, feeling the sting of loneliness and the weight of invisibility, but also something else, something like clarity. I couldn't change their choices, I couldn't force acknowledgement, but I could start noticing the patterns, the small silences, the hidden exclusions, and understand the truths behind them. That night, as I lay in my childhood bedroom, the muffled sounds of the family cleaning up downstairs, I felt a mix of sorrow and resolve. sorrow for the trust that had been quietly broken, but also resolve to carry myself with dignity, to cultivate a calm strength that didn't depend on their recognition. I realized that emotional strength isn't about making others see you. It's about seeing yourself, even when no one else does. And for the first time that evening, I felt the faintest flicker of what it might mean to reclaim my own peace quietly, wisely, without shouting or proving anything. The next morning, the house felt heavier than usual. Thanksgiving had ended, but its silence lingered, clinging to the walls like smoke that refused to dissipate. I wandered into the kitchen, hoping for the comfort of coffee, hoping for the normal warmth of family chatter, but it was gone. Mom hummed softly while washing dishes. Dad was quietly reading the newspaper, and my brother, he avoided my eyes completely. I thought about the blocked messages. I couldn't stop thinking about them. Not just because they hurt, but because they revealed something I hadn't wanted to admit. My brother, the one person I had trusted the most, had chosen to erase my achievements, my voice, my presence, every congratulations I had sent over the past year had disappeared into some digital void he controlled. It wasn't jealousy or a passing lapse, it was deliberate. I took my laptop to the dining table, hesitating before reopening the group chat. I scrolled carefully, almost fearing what I might find, and there it was, the thread that should have been full of smiles, small celebrations, emojis, and encouragement. It was empty. Not a single one of my announcements had been acknowledged. The past year of my efforts, my growth, my moments of pride, had been quietly swept aside. I felt a tight knot in my chest, a mixture of hurt and disbelief. How could someone so close, someone I had confided in, act like I didn't exist? I wanted to confront him, to demand answers, but something in me stayed still. I didn't want drama. I didn't want anger, I wanted clarity. Over the next few days, I observed him more closely, noticing the little things I had ignored before. The way he casually mentioned work achievements of friends while skipping over mine. The subtle changes in family stories where my role was minimized or completely omitted. The way he would smile at me, yet there was a careful distance in his eyes, as though I were a guest in my own life. It was painful, yes, but also illuminating. I began to see that the problem wasn't just him. It was the silence I had tolerated, the trust I had given without boundaries. I had assumed my presence, my efforts, and my feelings would be naturally acknowledged, and when they weren't, it hurt. But this realization, as sharp as it was, carried a strange sense of freedom. I could see the truth now, even if it was uncomfortable. The care, the recognition, and the respect I sought from him had been withheld by choice. I didn't tell anyone what I had discovered immediately. I watched quietly, observing without judgment. I noticed moments where he subtly manipulated conversations, moments where he tried to rewrite events in ways that painted him as the thoughtful, attentive one, while I was barely present. And I realized something else. This wasn't about revenge or anger. This was about boundaries, about learning to protect my own sense of worth in spaces where it wasn't recognized. One evening, I found myself alone in my room, scrolling through old emails and messages. I read each one as though piecing together a puzzle of my own life. The disappointment lingered, but beneath it, I felt a growing clarity. These silences, these omissions, this deliberate exclusion, it wasn't a reflection of my value. It was a reflection of their choices, their limitations, their inability to honor me. I started to take small steps, quietly asserting myself in ways that didn't involve confrontation. I shared updates at work with colleagues who celebrated them genuinely. I wrote in my journal, recording victories, thoughts, and feelings that I had previously shared with my brother. I allowed myself to feel proud without needing external validation. Slowly, I began to reclaim a sense of agency I hadn't realized I'd lost. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very betrayal that had cut me so deeply became the catalyst for my awakening. I was learning to see the truth not just about my brother, but about myself, about the quiet strength that comes from knowing your own worth and refusing to rely on anyone else to affirm it. By the end of that week, Thanksgiving felt like a distant memory. The sting of exclusion still lingered, but it no longer defined me. I was still hurt, yes, but I was also learning patience, observation, and the subtle art of emotional self-preservation. I realized that silence could be a teacher, that calm reflection could be more powerful than confrontation, and that sometimes the kindest act of self-respect is simply noticing who is willing to honor your presence and who is not. And so, the quiet lessons began. I had been blocked, ignored, and unseen, but I was beginning to see. And in that seeing, I started to grow. A year passed in silence. Not the loud, dramatic silence of arguments or slammed doors, but the quiet kind, the one that hums in the background of everyday life and gradually reshapes how you see the world. My brother's absence from my digital life, once a sharp, shocking betrayal, became a subtle, constant reminder that some people will not honor your truth. The first few months were hard. Every holiday, every family dinner, I found myself scanning the room, wondering if anyone had noticed the milestones I had quietly achieved. I reminded myself that I had proof of my promotion, of my accomplishments, of my growth, but proof didn't always soften the ache of invisibility. There were moments when I wanted to ask questions, demand explanations, even break the calm I was trying so hard to maintain. But I didn't. I watched. I waited. I observed. In that watching, I began to notice patterns I hadn't seen before. My brother's small manipulations, the way he subtly rewrote family narratives, the moments he diminished my presence. All of it became clearer. It wasn't a single act of malice. It was a series of choices over time, and in seeing it, I realized that anger or confrontation would only give him the power to disrupt my peace. My quiet, careful observation became my strength. I learned to protect myself emotionally. I started sending updates not expecting acknowledgement, simply because I wanted to document my life, to honor my own growth. I celebrated my achievements, quietly treating myself to small tokens of recognition, sharing victories with friends who truly cared, and allowing myself to feel proud without anyone else's approval. It was liberating, though the liberation was subtle. It came not with applause, but with a quiet, steady confidence that my worth was mine to define. There were hard moments. Holidays still carried an edge of melancholy, a reminder that my family didn't see me as fully as I had hoped. I felt the sting of exclusion when my brother spoke over me in conversation, or failed to mention an accomplishment I had shared online with him months before. But instead of reacting, I took note. I observed how these actions made me feel, how they shaped my own boundaries, and how I could respond with grace instead of anger. I discovered a strange beauty in this quiet process. While the world around me seemed oblivious, I was learning more about myself than I ever had before. I realized that emotional strength doesn't come from being acknowledged by others, it comes from acknowledging yourself. It comes from tending to your own sense of value, even when the people you love cannot or will not. Over time, I started to notice subtle shifts within my family. It wasn't that they suddenly acknowledged my achievements or apologized for their past silence. It was that I no longer needed them to. I carried my accomplishments with a calm pride, a quiet dignity that didn't require validation. When my parents asked about work, I spoke with confidence without needing their approval. When my brother avoided my eyes or subtly dismissed my words, I let it pass, knowing that his choices reflected his character, not mine. I also began to appreciate the power of silence, not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of observation, of measured reflection, of letting truth reveal itself naturally. Over the months, I realized that my calm presence, my steady confidence, and my refusal to be diminished became more powerful than any confrontation ever could be. The year of silence, painful as it had been, had shaped me into someone who could carry her own worth quietly, but unmistakably. By the end of that year, I felt a transformation within myself. The hurt was still there, but it no longer controlled me. The betrayal remained, but it had lost its sting. I had learned that boundaries are not walls to keep people out, but fences to protect your peace. I had learned that emotional honesty with yourself is far more valuable than forced acknowledgement from others. And I had learned that strength is often quiet, that dignity is unshakable, and that peace is the sweetest form of justice. As I sat in my room one evening, reflecting on the year that had passed, I felt a deep sense of calm. I had survived the quiet erasure, the subtle betrayals, the small dismissals, and in surviving, I had grown not loud, not vengeful, but steady, wise, and strong in a way that no one could take away from me. The year of silence had taught me more than any conversation, any argument, or any confrontation ever could. It had taught me that I am enough, that my achievements are mine, that my worth does not require external validation, and that sometimes the most powerful response to betrayal is not anger, but grace. The next Thanksgiving came with a strange mix of anticipation and detachment. After a year of quiet observation and reflection, I had grown used to carrying my achievements and my worth with me, regardless of who noticed or who didn't. And yet, something about returning to the familiar house, the one filled with the aroma of roasted turkey, pumpkin pie, and the low murmur of conversation, stirred a residual hope. I walked in carrying a carefully prepared dish, not because I needed validation, but because traditions mattered to me, and because I was learning that grace sometimes means showing up even when you've been hurt. My parents greeted me warmly, their eyes brighter than last year, though still unaware of the full story behind the quiet distance between my brother and me. He sat across the table, phone in hand as usual, pretending not to notice me. For a moment, I felt the old pang of irritation, the sharp sting that had accompanied me through the last year. But it passed almost immediately. I remembered the months I had spent building a calm strength within myself, the lessons I had learned about boundaries, and the quiet dignity of choosing my own peace over anger. I greeted him politely, letting my words carry neutrality instead of accusation. "Happy Thanksgiving," I said, and offered a small smile that was more about acknowledging my own presence than expecting a response. He looked up briefly, gave a curt nod, and returned to his phone. I could have demanded recognition. I could have recounted the blocked messages, the subtle dismissals, the entire year of erasure. I could have reminded him of the promotion, of my growth, of the effort I had poured into my career. But I didn't. I realized that confrontation would not add to my peace. It would only give him a stage, and I had no interest in performing. Instead, I chose quiet observation. I noticed the laughter of other relatives, the small gestures of care, the subtle ways my parents tried to include me. And for the first time, I allowed myself to feel the warmth without attaching it to validation. I had learned that belonging is not about being acknowledged by everyone. It's about being fully present with yourself. Later, when we sat around digesting the meal, my brother muttered a casual remark about work, almost dismissive. I let it pass. I responded simply, calmly, with no edge in my voice. Just enough information to carry the conversation forward. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. He could ignore me, block me, or diminish me, but he could never take away the confidence I had built quietly over the last year. After the meal, I stepped into the kitchen to clear my dish. Mom reached for my arm, and this time she looked me in the eye. "You've been so busy this year," she said softly. "Tell me more about your work." I smiled. This was the acknowledgment I had always sought, but now it felt lighter, not essential. I shared a few highlights of my promotion, careful to let the pride rest gently on my shoulders rather than demanding her reaction. Mom listened with genuine interest, and I realized that the calm confidence I had cultivated had shifted the dynamic. I was no longer seeking validation. I was simply telling my truth. When the evening ended and I said my goodbyes, I felt a deep sense of peace. I didn't need to confront my brother about the blocked messages. I didn't need to demand recognition or force apologies. The year of silence, observation, and quiet reflection had given me something far more valuable: the ability to choose my own response, to maintain my dignity, and to honor my own worth without relying on anyone else. As I drove home, the cool night air brushing against my cheeks, I reflected on the lessons the year had taught me. Boundaries are not walls. They are tools to protect your emotional well-being. Trust is precious, and when it is broken, it is wiser to respond with calm clarity than with anger. And most importantly, self-respect is the quiet, unshakable force that allows you to navigate betrayal with grace and emerge stronger. I had survived erasure and subtle betrayal. I had grown stronger, calmer, wiser, and in that calm, I discovered a freedom that no one could take from me. The door I didn't slam was not just the one leading out of the house. It was the door to my own peace, left open for the life I was choosing to live on my own terms. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the quiet, enduring satisfaction of being fully seen by myself,